Highways are useful connections between cities, but it's generally accepted that building highways through cities, especially through established neighborhoods, has been one of the biggest urban planning blunders of the past century. From Chicago to Charlotte, Montreal to Miami, Dallas to Denver, Los Angeles to Los Angeles, urban highways have plowed through neighborhoods, displaced families, and left lingering problems like asthma and developmental delays in children. Jane Jacobs became an urbanist icon fighting urban highway projects in New York and Toronto, including the Spadina Expressway that would have run through our former neighborhood of the Annex. But do the disasters of urban highways have anything to teach us about housing? We're very critical of Not in My Backyard activists who fight against newer, denser housing development in their neighborhoods. But stepping back, aren't they just exhibiting the same spirit of grassroots citizen activism and skepticism of big change that led Jane Jacobs and others to fight to protect their neighborhoods against the overreaches of urban highway master plans? In this video, we're going to explain the difference between highways and housing as we see it, and why not all NIMBYism is created equal.
One fundamental difference is that urban highways typically involve the government expropriating people's homes, while new housing developments are usually people or companies voluntarily building housing on their own land. You have quite a bit of legitimacy to oppose your government seizing and tearing down your neighbor's house to build a highway, but we don't think you have as much standing to oppose your neighbor building a laneway suite in their own backyard, or voluntarily selling their home to a developer to build apartments. Even when an urban highway doesn't involve expropriation, like Ottawa's goal of building a highway through this city-owned park, it's still your government acting in your name, and you have a certain legitimacy in petitioning them to change their plans. To be clear, this doesn't always have positive effects. An exciting metro line in the east end of our city got cancelled because of community opposition to it being elevated. We really disagree with their complaints, and with the government caving in, but there's still a certain legitimacy in citizens making their arguments about a public project done in their name with their money that doesn't exist, at least not to the same extent, for private projects on private land. Of course, some housing projects in the past did involve government expropriation, so-called slum clearance or urban renewal, that often happened alongside urban highway projects, but that's generally not the kind of infill housing development that we're debating today.
Another major difference is that highways harm quality of life in much more concrete ways, quite literally. A highway through your neighborhood creates constant noise and pollution that can measurably harm your health and reduce your life expectancy. Highways divide neighborhoods and make it harder for pedestrians and cyclists to navigate their city. On-ramps and off-ramps are pedestrian safety hazards. This bus stop near a highway in Ottawa has a box with earplug packages for people to use while waiting for the bus, because it's so loud and unpleasant to be there. We'll grant that living near a residential construction site can be loud and disruptive, but aside from that, the long-term threats posed by apartments, like shadows or the worry that taller buildings will look out of place, feel absolutely trivial in comparison to highways. We've lived near apartments and we've lived near highways, and we'll take the apartments any day. Aside from aesthetics, another complaint that people have with apartments is that new residents will use up street parking. Maybe this is our urbanist bias, but we just don't believe that existing residents have the right to guaranteed free storage for their cars on the streets, or to exclude new neighbors on this basis. If you want guaranteed parking, you can rent or buy a home with a parking spot, or rent or buy space on private land.
The last fundamental difference between highways and housing is that urban highways have obvious alternatives, while housing doesn't. When you say no to new housing, you're saying you can't live here, go away, we're full. It's fundamentally exclusionary. That's not the case when you say no to an urban highway. It's valid to prefer that people travel to or through your neighborhood in ways that don't degrade quality of life as much, like transit. The Spadina subway carries far more people than the Spadina Expressway ever could have, with far less disruption to the neighborhood. Even an above-ground or elevated train doesn't come close to the same disruption caused by an urban highway. Of course, cities still need road networks for buses, service vehicles, deliveries, emergency vehicles, and so on. But Toronto still has those today, so clearly the Spadina Expressway wasn't necessary for them. If anything, another highway dumping more commuter cars into the same street grid downtown might have just caused more gridlock for deliveries and emergency vehicles going around town.
We appreciate the legacy of Jane Jacobs fighting against urban highways, but we don't think it justifies modern anti-housing NIMBYism today. We understand how the same fighting spirit gets carried over like muscle memory, and people learn to associate urbanism with stopping things from happening. But there are fundamental differences between highways and housing, and people need to recognize that at some point you're not saving your neighborhood, you're just excluding new people from living there.
Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.